Hi everyone, welcome to Science Lab. The signs are happening because Lord Jesus is coming. Every day we are looking at some of the great signs happening around us.
Today we are going to look at some of the end time signs happening in Europe.
75 years ago, the world was slowly picking up itself up after the most destructive conflict in the history of the mankind. Around 60 million had died, 200,000 of those in just two gigantic explosions that brought the war to a close.
Around the world, statesmen worked to build a new order that would ensure such a war would never happen again.
United States General Douglas MacArthur said following Japan's surrender ceremony on September 2, 1945. Men since the beginning of time had sought peace, military alliances, balances of power, League of Nations all in turn failed, leaving the only path to be by way of the crucible of war. The utter destructiveness of war now blots out this alternative. We have had our last chance. If we do not now devise some greater and more equitable system, Armageddon will be at our door. Much of this hope for a greater system was invested in the United Nations, a new institution designed to preserve and, if necessary, enforce world peace. Almost 75 years to the day from victory over Japan Day, the United Nations has proved it has totally failed in that task. A lot of people would say that to the date of UN hasn't done and bad for a job. Sure, there has been about 300 wars and 3,000 other conflicts since that time. But none have been close to as bad as the World War II. But it would be dangerous to get complacent. As American geopolitical thinker Nicholas Spikeman wrote, the states of Europe were at war 75% of the time in the 17th century, 50% in the 18th century, and 25% in the 19th century. It seems that the frequency of war is declining, but the effect of a struggle is more and more devastating and involves great cost in human life and material destruction. The total effect of war on the life of nations has not decreased but increased, notwithstanding the lengthening periods of peace. There are already signs of things going badly wrong at the UN. Its job appointments read like a parody. Iran has spent many years in many positions on the UN Disagreement Commission. Syria has been the vice president of the Atomic Energy Agency. Zimbabwe has chaired the Commission of Sustainable Development. Libya has chaired Disarmament International Security. China, Russia, and Saudi Arabia have all sat on the UN Human Rights Commission. Then there are all the scandals. The UN's Oil for Food program in Iraq has been labeled the biggest scam in human history. Funneling billions of Iraqi director Saddam Hussein, a similar program ended up funneling money to former North Korean Supreme Leader Kim Jong-il. UN missions have failed to prevent genocide. One in the Congo participated in their own atrocity, raping many local women, including teenage girls. In Israel, in 2000, the UN peacekeeping mission actually cooperated with Hezbollah in kidnapping 3 Israeli soldiers. There are UN's constant demonization of Israel. Countries like Germany and Japan, which renounce militarism, have re-inhabited their militaries and broken taboos about deploying abroad through UN peacemaking missions. But on August 14, 2020, the UN had one of its biggest ever failures. It voted to allow Iran access to the international arms market. Iran had been under an arms embargo since 2007, but the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Active gave it a way out. Unless the UN Security Council stepped in and intervened, that embargo would end in October 2020. Only one other nation joined US in voting for the sanctions to be extended. Russia and China vetoed it, while European countries, including the United Kingdom, sat on the sidelines and abstained. This vote will give Iran a huge boost. Up to this point, Iran has had to get with weapons produced domestically, as well as an aging fleet of aircraft sold to Iran before the embargo began. With this limited scope of weaponry, Iran has dominated its neighbors and threatened the Jewish state with repeated wars. But now, just in 3 months, the world's #1 state sponsor of terrorism could be armed with conventional weapons that would tip the balance of power in the Middle East. Iran can buy Russian fighter jets that can reach Jerusalem and even Rome.
Welcome back to Science Lab. The signs are happening because Lord Jesus is coming. We have seen about the end-time signs happening in Europe. Let's continue. Russia and China and even France and Germany believe they can gain if the US weakens. Empowering Iran weakens America, and so they will empower Iran despite the massive risk.
The structure of the UN set itself up for failure. The only way to persuade the world's major power to join is to give them veto power over its decisions. This means the only way the UN can act is if Russia, China, and America are on the same page. It will only happen if America lets China and Russia get it their way.
But letting Russia and China get their way means allowing these nations to ride roughshod over smaller powers. And if the rights of these helpless millions are to be trampled upon with impunity as the price of peace with Russia, then we will still have no peace. Do what Russia and China want, and you won't have peace. Stand up to Russia, China, and the UN stop functioning and cannot bring peace. It fails either way. But why? The problem basically is theological and involves a spiritual recrudescence and improvement of human character that will synchronize with the almost matchless advance in science, art, literature, and all the material and cultural development of the past 2000 years. It must be of the spirit if we are to save the flesh. It's not only about setting up some kinds of institution, but the way of peace means changing man's basic nature. It is the human to be sensitive about securing one's own right while disregarding the rights of its neighbor. So men are tempted to lie, steal, and to kill in order to get what they want. With man left to themselves, their baser inclinations unrestrained, with selfishness given free pay, there can be no peace or order in this world. Man's mind and will are too weak. The downward impulses of nature are too strong. The two great commands, love toward God and love toward neighbor, point the only path to peace. Without government over man, therefore, we cannot have peace between individuals. But as we rise in the scale of human relations, the problem of peace and good order becomes more complex, yet the solution remains the same. If the maintenance of peace and order is difficult as between men and men, if it is more difficult as between citizens and government, it is most difficult of all as between nation and nation. The basic conflict is the same as before, that is human nature, but the stakes are higher. In the international realm, the selfishness of human nature reaches its lowest level. Nowhere else are the temptations to greed and lust for power so nearly irresistible. National selfishness is more than the sum total of the selfishness of individuals. Just as individual man cannot control and resist the downward pull of his passions and nature, so this nation, swayed by national selfishness greater than the sum total of the selfishness of all individuals, cannot control his ambitions and lust for power and international aggression. The United Nations has not brought man peace. In empowering Iran, the UN is accomplishing the opposite of its intended purpose. It is accelerating man down the path to nuclear war. But there is a solution. Except the Lord build the house, they labor in vain that build it. The United Nations organization will fail. It is doomed before it starts. Man cannot change his own nature, man cannot bring peace, but God can. If you believe in a loving God, then you have to believe that such a God won't allow mankind to destroy itself in a nuclear war.
But you don't have to wait until then. The way of peace is a practical way of life that you can live today. You cannot bring peace to the world. You can't solve the problems of United Nations, but you can bring peace to your life and your family. You can be a part of God's plan to bring peace to the world.
All this shows that what is mentioned in the Bible that are going to take place in the end times are taking place in our lifetime. We are living in the last days. Lord Jesus Christ is coming again very soon. Thank you for watching this episode. Don't forget to tune into Science Lab next time.
Before ending the show, we would like to ask you a question. When was the United Nations founded? Option A, October the 24th, 1940. And option B, October the 24th, 1945. And option C, October the 24th, 1950.
Send us your correct answer to our email address sciencelab@angeltv.org. If you have missed any of the episodes, don't worry. You can watch it again in our Science Lab YouTube page. But don't forget to like, share and comment on the video.
Ask your friends and relatives to watch the Science Lab.